Welcome to the basics of APA style. Are you frustrated by APA style? Of course you are. The way you learned to write was probably very different. So you have to learn a whole new way of writing. But there actually is a purpose and a reason that we have APA style. And that primary purpose is to enhance communication by standardizing the style and format in which you write. APA style will be the required format for your capstone research project, whether that's a dissertation or field-based research project or an assignment in a course. And APA style will likely be required by the outlet in which you publish your work if you choose to do so. What will we cover in this video? We'll cover the basics of APA style, including something that students ask a lot about, and that is verb tense and voice, how to cite resources in the body of your paper, how to use direct quotes in the body of your paper, and APA formatting. We won't go too in-depth in APA formatting because we have a series of cheat sheets that we've done that covers a lot of that information. Let's first talk about voice. The APA manual recommends that you use an active voice when you write, but note that APA does not require it. And the reason it's recommended is because it's more direct and allows writing to be more concise and perhaps easier to comprehend for your audience. So consider the following two examples. Here's the sentence written in passive voice. The claim was made by the researcher. An active voice would be the researcher made the claim. As you can see, the active voice is more concise and direct. But there are cases when a passive voice may actually be recommended. For example, you might want to use a passive voice if you want to emphasize the object of the sentence. For example, the chocolate charge theory was not supported by the results of the study. That's a passive form of the sentence, but it really emphasizes the chocolate charge theory. So if you want to put emphasis on theory, this may be a better option for you. And consider that in contrast to the active voice of that sentence, or that active version of that sentence. The results of the study did not support the chocolate charge theory. Here the emphasis is on the results. So again, when you can, use an active voice when you're writing in APA style, but again, there are cases when it may be better to use the passive voice when you want to emphasize a certain part of the sentence, the object. Another question that students often ask is about verb tense. And so for each section of your APA style manuscript or document, there will be different recommendations for verb tense. So in the introduction, where you review the literature, APA recommends past tense when you're citing your sources, and that is because the work has already been done. So for example, so here's the past tense, Candy and Bar found, or you can use a present perfect, Candy and Bar have shown. In the methods section, it's the same thing. If you are writing the final version of your dissertation, for example, and you've already collected your data and executed the project, you're talking about the methods section in the past. So you can say, for example, the participants completed an assessment. However, if the purpose of your project or your paper is to propose a methodology or study, then you'll use future tense. For example, the participants will complete an assessment. The results section, again, if you've already completed the project and analyzed the data, here you will again use the past tense. The results showed. And then finally, when you get to this discussion, it's a little different because now you are discussing your interpretation and what the implications are for your results or your analysis. So here you would use the present tense. For example, these results align well with theory X, Y, and Z. Another often asked question is how to properly cite sources in the body of a paper. So when you are describing a study, theory, methods, or ideas of another author or authors, you must give them credit. That's a whole reason why we have a set of guidelines for citing sources. Citing sources also lends credibility to your writing if you can show that others have come to the same conclusions, how your theory or how your research supports a theory, then that adds weight to your argument. But be careful here because you need to avoid plagiarism. So if you have cited someone's ideas or summarized or paraphrased someone else, you need to make sure you give them credit. So even if you think you have put it in a very different way and worded it very differently, you still need to give those ideas credit. Changing a few words here and there from a source is called patch writing, and it is a form of plagiarism. We do have some other materials in our modules on plagiarism that you should review to make sure you understand what patch writing it is and how to avoid it. Citing sources in your text. So here is an example of if you are citing a series of authors maybe who've come to a similar conclusion, and how you would do that at the end of a statement. So here is the fictional example. There is growing evidence that students perform better on exams after eating chocolate peanut butter cups. And the authors in parentheses are Hershey 2010, Love Candy and Bars 2000, and Reese's and Reese's 2018. So you'll notice that you use an ampersand, the symbol for and, when you cite a source with more than one author, and if it's in parentheses. And you do need to put, if you're citing multiple authors, put them in alphabetical order. So the H in Hershey comes before the L in Love, etc., etc. And then you use a semicolon to separate the sources that you've cited. So here's another way to cite a single work within the body of your paper, and if you want to maybe put a little more emphasis on a particular source. So here's a fictional example. Love Candy and Bars in 2010 asserted that providing students with 1 ounce of chocolate 10 minutes prior to an exam improves performance significantly. So here you're writing about a specific study, so maybe you don't want to put them in parentheses at the end of the sentence, so maybe you want to put more emphasis on the specific authors or the study. And here you would spell out and in this case when you have more than one author. You don't use an ampersand when you are citing within the body of the paper like this. Now here's another example when maybe there's an idea that you want to discuss that's on a specific page, or it's something you want to direct your reader's attention to. So here's a fictional example. Reese's and Reese's 2010, page 212, claim their learning theory called the chocolate charge is a new contribution to the field of education. So if you want to cite page numbers, and when it's a single page, it's just P period and then the page number. If it's multiple pages, then it's PP period and then the series of page numbers. So you only want to use this format if maybe they discuss the chocolate charge on that particular page and you really want to draw your reader's attention to that particular page. It's maybe something very notable or unusual, but usually you're summarizing the results in generalities, so you do not need to cite specific page numbers if you're just generally summarizing results. So a lot of students enjoy using direct quotes when they write academic papers, but as a rule you want to use them sparingly or even avoid them completely. You need to reserve direct quotes for a time when you simply couldn't state it better yourself. Or if it's some striking original quote from the first time someone wrote about a theory. So there may be some unusual situations when you might want to quote word for word what an author stated. So here's an example, and it's a fictional example. There may be foods other than chocolate that have properties that facilitate learning. A group of Scottish researchers claim that, quote unquote, butterscotch may be as effective as chocolate for decreasing blood pressure before an exam, and this in turn may boost performance, end quote. I and Wish, 2013, page 10. Now you can, just like we did in the past few examples, you can format that differently. So here's another way you can format it. If you want to put more emphasis on the authors. So I and Wish, 2013, stated that, quote, butterscotch may be as effective as chocolate for decreasing blood pressure before an exam, and this in turn may boost performance, end quote, page 10. And then you can also put a third format. You can put the page 10 right after the year 2013 in parentheses. So do keep in mind, though, that another reason to use direct quotes sparingly is that if you use them too much, then they kind of lose the effectiveness. They should be something that really draws the attention of the reader because they're so rare and they're reserved for something unusual. And it also kind of breaks up the comprehension of your paper by switching voices. So it's better to generally avoid direct quotes. Okay, formatting in APA style. This is often a very frustrating thing for students to learn, so do review our cheat sheets on APA style citations, how to format tables and figures, and general formatting. But our biggest tip is that sometimes people find a concrete example helpful when they're trying to learn APA style. So do note that within the APA manual, there's a sample manuscript in it. It includes headings, tables, figures, how to format your references. So that is a great way to learn formatting in APA. Just to recap, APA style and academic writing are new to most graduate students, and so just keep in mind that it's kind of like learning a new language and it takes some time. Here's a few tips for you to help you learn APA. Ask your fellow students or peers to review your writing for APA style and do the same for them. You might find that you will learn from each other's mistakes. And then the final tip I'll leave you with is that it's a good idea to write your papers in advance and then set it aside for a few days so then you can come back and look at it with a fresh eye. You're more likely to catch those APA style mistakes when you haven't seen it for a while and you're kind of disconnected from the writing, and you can look at it with a fresh eye. I hope this video was helpful to you.